Have you ever wondered why we give roses on Saint Valentine's Day? Behind the heart-shaped chocolates and romantic cards lies a much deeper and more moving love story. It is the tale of two courageous men who gave their lives to defend true love at a time when loving freely could cost you your life. A priest who celebrated marriages in secret, and a bishop who taught about love using the roses from his garden. Two saints named Valentine, two martyrs, one shared passion for protecting sacred love. And it all began in those dark days of the Roman Empire, when to love could be an act of rebellion. Chapter 1. The Saint of Love in Rome. The young Valentine walked the streets of Rome with determined steps, his priestly tunic fluttering softly as he made his way to his small church. It was the year 268, and the atmosphere in the city was heavy with tension. Christians met in secret, and Father Valentine had dedicated his life to serving this growing community that struggled to keep its faith alive in times of persecution. From a very early age, Valentine had shown a special sensitivity to the spiritual needs of his people. His training in the Christian faith, received from the elders of the church, had prepared him to face the challenges ahead. His homilies, full of wisdom and compassion, attracted more and more faithful who found in his words solace amid adversity. Father Valentine's life was devoted to prayer and pastoral service. Every morning before dawn, he dedicated himself to contemplation in his small cell, spiritually preparing for whatever trials the day might bring. The faithful described him as a man of deep prayer, whose face reflected an inner peace that contrasted with the turmoil of the times. His ministry took a decisive turn when Emperor Claudius II issued an edict prohibiting marriages among soldiers. This imperial decision, aimed at strengthening the army, struck the Christian community hard. Valentine saw in this prohibition not only an injustice against human love, but also a direct attack on the sacrament of marriage instituted by Christ. In the intimacy of his church, Father Valentine began receiving young couples seeking his counsel and blessing. His compassionate eyes listened to the stories of love thwarted by the imperial edict, and his priestly heart could not remain indifferent to the suffering of these young lovers. It was then that he made a decision that would mark his destiny forever. He would begin celebrating marriages in secret, defying imperial law in the name of a higher law. Chapter 2. Rome in times of persecution. The streets of Rome in the year 268 buzzed with political and social tensions. The Roman Empire, once glorious and stable, faced one of its greatest crises. Emperor Claudius II, known as the Gothic, had come to power amid internal conflicts and external threats. The Roman legions, which had been the pride of the empire for centuries, were suffering increasingly frequent defeats at the frontiers. In the military barracks, soldiers whispered their concerns. Many of them, whether already in love or betrothed, watched with anguish as their dreams of starting a family faded before the new imperial policies. The emperor, obsessed with strengthening his army, concluded that married soldiers were less effective in battle than bachelors, since the love they bore for their wives and families made them more cautious and less willing to sacrifice themselves in combat. The imperial decision soon materialized in an edict that strictly prohibited marriage for all soldiers in active service. This proclamation, which resounded like a thunderclap in every corner of the empire, was particularly devastating for the Christian community. For them, marriage was not simply a civil union, but a sacred sacrament, a divine institution reflecting the love between Christ and his church. In the catacombs and secret meeting places, Christians shared their fears and hopes. Christian families, already persecuted for their faith, now saw the state attempting to control even their most personal decisions. Young lovers found themselves facing a heart-wrenching dilemma: to choose between their military vocation and their desire to form a Christian family. In this atmosphere of oppression and fear, the figure of Father Valentine began to shine as a beacon of hope. His small church became a refuge for those seeking counsel and comfort. While the Roman authorities intensified their surveillance and control over the population, the brave priest prepared to face one of the greatest challenges of his ministry, defending sacred love in times of persecution. Chapter 3. Priest Valentine and the Secret Marriages. Night had enveloped Rome with its protective cloak when two young people, a soldier and his fiancée, approached Father Valentine's modest church stealthily. It was the darkest hour, just before dawn, the moment the priest had chosen to celebrate secret marriages. With trembling but determined hands, they gently knocked on the back door of the temple. Father Valentine's reputation as a defender of true love had spread like a whisper among Rome's Christians. His clandestine ministry had begun shortly after the imperial edict, when a young couple, desperate to receive God's blessing for their union, pleaded with him to marry them in secret. From that moment on, his priestly heart could not refuse to help those seeking to sanctify their love. The ceremonies were brief, yet profoundly significant. In the dim light of the church, illuminated only by a few candles, Father Valentine celebrated the sacrament with a blend of solemnity and urgency. His words, softly spoken yet firm, reminded the couples that their love was a reflection of Christ's love for his church. Each marriage he celebrated was an act of peaceful resistance against the injustice of the imperial edict. To protect both the couples and himself, Father Valentine developed an elaborate system of secret signals and messages. Flowers became his means of communication. Different types of flowers, placed in specific locations, indicated safe times and meeting spots. This practice would later give rise to the tradition of gifting flowers on Saint Valentine's Day. However, each ceremony increased the risk of being discovered. Father Valentine was well aware that his ministry could cost him his life, but his conviction in the sanctity of marriage was stronger than his fear. True love, he would say to the couples, deserves to be blessed, even if the whole world stands against it. His words would become a prophetic testament to his own fate. Chapter 4. The Miracle of the Prefect's Daughter. News of the secret marriages celebrated by Father Valentine finally reached the ears of Emperor Claudius II. The arrest of the priest was immediate, and to the surprise of many, the emperor decided to personally interrogate him before the people. In the middle of the forum, surrounded by guards and onlookers, Valentine eloquently and courageously defended the sacredness of Christian marriage, even impressing Claudius with his wisdom and conviction. Intrigued by the priest's firmness and serenity, the emperor opted for an unusual measure. Instead of executing Valentine immediately, he ordered that Valentine be placed under house arrest in the home of Asterius, the prefect of Rome. This decision, which appeared as a sign of clemency, was in fact part of a plan to break the priest's faith, since Asterius was known for his strict adherence to pagan cults. In the prefect's house, Valentine met Asterius's daughter, a young woman born blind. Curious about the presence of the Christian prisoner, she began visiting Valentine in his quarters, where they engaged in long discussions about faith, love, and hope. The priest spoke of the light of Christ with such vividness that the young woman could almost see the truths he was sharing with her. One day, while they were deep in conversation, Valentine, moved by profound compassion and faith, placed his hands over the young woman's eyes and prayed fervently. In that instant, a miracle occurred. The darkness that had accompanied the young woman throughout her life vanished, and her eyes opened to the light of the world. Her cry of joy echoed throughout the house, drawing the attention of Asterius and his family. This miracle completely transformed the heart of the prefect and his family. Asterius, witnessing the power of the Christian faith, fell at Valentine's feet and requested to be instructed in the faith. In the days that followed, the entire family of the prefect, along with their servants, was baptized. The house that was meant to be a prison had become a domestic church, where the love of Christ shone more brightly than ever. Chapter 5. The Martyrdom of Father Valentine. The conversion of Asterius and his family did not go unnoticed in Rome. News of it reached the imperial palace swiftly, and Emperor Claudius II became enraged upon learning that his strategy had failed. The emperor, who had hoped that house arrest would break the priest's will, instead found that the Christian faith had grown stronger and spread under his own reign. The order came immediately and brutally. Valentine was to be taken to the Via Flaminia to be executed publicly. Soldiers burst into Asterius's house and dragged the priest to his final destiny. Along the way, Valentine maintained the serenity that had characterized him throughout his life, praying not only for himself, but also for all those he had united in marriage. Before his execution, Valentine asked for a moment to write a final letter. With steady hands, he drafted a farewell message to Asterius's daughter, thanking her for her faith and reminding her that God's love is stronger than any darkness. He signed the missive with the words, "Your Valentine," a phrase that would echo through the centuries and give rise to a worldwide tradition. On February 14th, in the year 269, under the Roman noon sun, Valentine was first flogged and then beheaded. The Christians who witnessed his martyrdom testified that he maintained a serene smile until the end, as if he could, beyond the veil of death, glimpse the glory that awaited him. His blood irrigated the soil of the Via Flaminia, sanctifying by his martyrdom the cause of Christian love. That night, a group of Christians risking their own lives recovered the martyr's body and buried it with honor. The place of his tomb would later become a pilgrimage site where couples over the centuries would come to seek his intercession. The martyr's blood became the seed from which new Christians sprouted, and his testimony in defense of true love would continue to inspire future generations. Chapter 6. The Bishop of Terni. In the ancient town of Terni, about 80 kilometers from Rome, the figure of Bishop Valentine rose like a beacon of wisdom and holiness. Unlike his namesake in Rome, this Valentine had been consecrated as a bishop, and his ministry was marked by a profound understanding of the complexities of the human heart. His episcopal residence, surrounded by a beautiful rose garden, had become a refuge for all who sought counsel and comfort. Bishop Valentine was known for his extraordinary gift of advice, a charisma that attracted people from all walks of life. The inhabitants of Terni said his manner of speaking was gentle yet incisive, as if every word were carefully chosen to touch the listener's heart. His reputation as a marital counselor spread well beyond the borders of his diocese. Bishop Valentine's mornings began before dawn, when he would retire to his private chapel to pray. The faithful who visited him at daybreak could hear him singing the Psalms as he tended his garden, a practice he considered a form of meditation. This garden, and especially its roses, would later serve as the setting for many of his most memorable lessons on love and marriage. The wisdom of Bishop Valentine was not limited to spiritual matters. His education included a deep knowledge of Greek and Roman philosophy, which allowed him to engage in dialogue with scholars and thinkers of his time. This blend of spiritual wisdom and intellectual knowledge made him a bridge between the pagan world and the Christian faith. In an era when marriage was often seen merely as a social or political contract, Bishop Valentine distinguished himself by defending the sacred dimension of conjugal love. His homilies on marriage attracted multitudes, and many couples traveled long distances just to receive his blessing. True love, he taught, is a reflection of God's love, and as such, it must be nurtured with the same care as one tends a rose. Chapter 7. The Wise Counselor of Lovers. Among Bishop Valentine's most remarkable gifts was his ability to reconcile couples in conflict. His methods were unique. Instead of long speeches or reprimands, he used parables and metaphors drawn from nature, especially from his beloved rose garden, to illustrate the deepest truths about love and forgiveness. His reputation as a counselor spread so widely that even pagan couples sought his guidance. For every situation, the bishop had a word of wisdom or a meaningful gesture, One of his most famous practices was to gift a rose to every couple that came to him, explaining that love, like a rose, must be cared for delicately yet with the strength to withstand its thorns. Young people saw in him not only a counselor but also a spiritual father. Bishop Valentine had a special gift for understanding the worries and fears of lovers, and his door was always open to those seeking advice on matters of the heart. Young love, he often said, is like a rosebud. It requires time, patience, and care to fully blossom. His teachings on marriage were revolutionary for his time. While Roman society often viewed marriage primarily as a social and political institution, Bishop Valentine insisted on its sacred nature and the fundamental equality between husband and wife. His words resonated especially with women, who found in his teachings a dignity frequently denied to them by society. In his role as a counselor, Bishop Valentine developed what we might now call marital therapy based on faith. He devoted hours to listening to couples, helping them uncover the roots of their conflicts and guiding them toward reconciliation through prayer and sincere dialogue. His method always incorporated three elements: compassionate listening, practical wisdom, and divine grace. Chapter 8. The Parable of the Rose. The Episcopal Garden of Terni was famous for its roses, but even more so for the lessons Bishop Valentine imparted there. One particularly memorable day, two young lovers were arguing heatedly by the garden wall. Their raised voices reached the ears of the saint who was tending his beloved roses. With the characteristic wisdom he was known for, the bishop took one of his most beautiful roses and approached the couple. His presence, with his cowl upon his head and that ever-present serene smile, was enough to make the young couple cease their quarrel. The image of the elderly bishop holding that perfect rose evoked a scene of peace that contrasted with the turmoil in their hearts. In silence, he extended the rose to the couple and asked them to hold it together. "Handle it carefully," he warned, "for its thorns may prick you." Intrigued by this unusual gesture, the young couple took the rose in unison, their hands meeting on the stem. The previous tension began to dissipate as they focused on holding the delicate flower without being hurt by its thorns. It was then that Bishop Valentine shared one of his most famous lessons. "Observe this rose," he said in a soft but firm voice. "It is beautiful and its fragrance delights the senses, yet it has thorns that can hurt, so it is with the love between two people. Differences and disagreements are like these thorns. They are an inherent part of the rose, and we cannot eliminate them without destroying the flower. The key is not to wish for a rose without thorns, but to learn to hold it with delicacy and respect." This lesson transformed not only the young couple, who shortly thereafter would celebrate their marriage in the Cathedral of Terni, but also became one of the most memorable teachings of the saint. The parable of the rose was passed down from generation to generation, reminding lovers that true love requires both beauty and strength, delicacy and resilience. Chapter 9. The Converted Philosopher. In the year 272, a renowned Greek philosopher named Crato arrived in Rome, accompanied by his brightest disciples. His reputation as a thinker had spread throughout the empire, and many sought his wisdom. However, it was an unexpected encounter with Bishop Valentine that would change the course of his life. During a public debate on the nature of love, Crato was struck by the depth of the bishop's words. The way Valentine intertwined Greek philosophy with Christian wisdom revealed a comprehension that went far beyond mere academic knowledge. The philosopher began visiting the bishop regularly, accompanied by three of his closest disciples. The conversations between the philosopher and the bishop stretched on for hours, covering topics from Platonic metaphysics to the deepest truths of the gospel. With his gift for making complex truths accessible, Valentine gradually guided Crato and his disciples toward the light of the Christian faith. Crato's conversion was a decisive moment. The respected philosopher, along with his 3 disciples, was baptized by Bishop Valentine. This event caused quite a stir in Rome, as Crato was a highly influential figure in the city's intellectual circles. However, this conversion also drew the unwanted attention of the imperial authorities. The bishop's ability to convert such prominent figures as Crato came to be seen as a threat to the established order. The shadows of martyrdom began to loom over the holy bishop of Terni. Chapter 10. The Second Martyrdom. The conversion of Crato and his disciples did not go unnoticed by Emperor Aurelian, who viewed with growing concern the influence of Christianity among Rome's intellectuals. In the year 273, while Bishop Valentine was preaching in Rome, an imperial order was issued for his immediate arrest. Soldiers burst into one of his sermons, yet the bishop maintained the serenity that had always characterized him. As he was brought before the imperial tribunal, his thoughts turned to his beloved rose garden in Terni, a symbol of so many of his teachings on true love. The trial took place in the presence of Emperor Aurelian himself, who saw in Valentine a threat to the stability of the empire. During the proceedings, Crato and his 3 disciples courageously appeared before the tribunal to defend their spiritual master. Their arguments, blending philosophical logic with the fervor of newly discovered faith, impressed all present. However, the emperor had already made his decision. Bishop Valentine was to be executed as an example. The sentence was pronounced. The bishop would be beheaded on February 14th, the same date on which years earlier Father Valentine of Rome had met his martyrdom. In his final hours, the holy bishop maintained the same serenity with which he had counseled countless couples throughout his life. It is said that his last act was to hand a rose to his jailer, accompanied by a message about God's love. The execution took place at dawn on the appointed day. The 3 converted philosophers, risking their own lives, recovered their master's body and secretly transported it to Terni. There, in the town he loved so much, the body of the holy bishop was interred with honor, and his tomb soon became a pilgrimage site for lovers. Chapter 11. The Legacy of the Saints Valentine. The story of the 2 saints, Valentine, began to intertwine in the memory of the Church as a unique testimony to Christian love. Their parallel lives, though different in circumstances, shared the same purpose: to defend sacred love and Christian marriage against adversity. The legacy of Father Valentine of Rome, with his courage to celebrate secret marriages, and that of Bishop Valentine of Terni, with his wisdom in counseling lovers, merged into a single tradition that would endure through the centuries. The roses, which had been the bishop's favored symbol in his teachings, became the universal emblem of romantic love. Reports of miracles and graces began to multiply around the tombs of both saints. Couples from all corners of the empire made pilgrimages to seek the intercession of the patron saints of love. The custom of exchanging love messages on February 14th, inspired by Father Valentine's final letter, spread first throughout Europe and then around the world. Recognizing the profound spiritual influence of these 2 saints, the Church incorporated their feast day into the liturgical calendar. St. Valentine's Day became a celebration that transcended religious boundaries, reminding the world that true love is a divine gift that must be protected and celebrated. Their teachings on Christian love continue to resonate today. The importance of fidelity, the value of sacrifice, the beauty of love consecrated by God, and the wisdom of accepting both the joys and challenges of marriage. The rose garden of Bishop Valentine continues to blossom metaphorically in every couple that aspires to live love as a reflection of divine love. Chapter 12. The Relics and the Cult. At the heart of the ancient town of Terni, the Carmelites' church houses one of the most treasured relics of Christianity, the relics of Saint Valentine, the bishop. A silver urn, finely crafted by medieval artisans, preserves his mortal remains. Beside it, an inscription in Latin proclaims with sober elegance, "Saint Valentine, patron of love." The stained glass window that adorns the church silently tells the saint's story. Its vibrant colors capture the moment when Saint Valentine blesses a young couple kneeling together holding a rose. This image, created in the 14th century, became one of the most emblematic representations of the saint, inspiring artists and the faithful alike for generations. Pilgrimages to the sacred sites associated with the two Valentines have never ceased. In Rome, the place of Father Valentine's martyrdom on the Via Flaminia continues to be visited by believers from all over the world. The basilica, built upon his tomb, although modified over the centuries, keeps alive the memory of the priest who gave his life to defend sacred love. In the Carmelites' church, a centuries-old tradition comes to life every February 14th. Fiancés and couples gather in a procession to receive a special blessing before the saint's relics. The ritual includes the presentation of a blessed rose in memory of Bishop Valentine's teachings and the renewal of love vows before his urn. Over the centuries, the cult of the Saints Valentine spread far beyond Italy's borders. Churches and chapels dedicated to their memory have sprung up in different parts of the world, each adapting local traditions while preserving the essence of their message. True love is a sacred gift that must be celebrated and protected. Chapter 13. Miracles and Graces. The archives of the Carmelites' Church carefully preserve testimonies of countless miracles attributed to the intercession of the Saints Valentine. Among the most remarkable is the case of an 18th-century couple who, on the verge of divorce, experienced a miraculous reconciliation after praying before the saint's relics. Their story, documented in detail, speaks of a mysterious rose that appeared in their room the morning after their prayer. Numerous accounts of physical healings are also found in the records. Particularly significant are the cases of restored sight, echoing the initial miracle performed by Father Valentine with the prefect's daughter. One especially moving incident occurred in 1923, when a young blind woman regained her sight after a novena to Saint Valentine, allowing her to see her fiancé's face for the first time. Testimonies of spiritual conversions attributed to the saints are equally numerous. Many recount how, following the example of Crato and his disciples, they found faith through the teachings on Christian love, transmitted by the Valentine tradition. These conversions often involved not only individuals, but entire families. More recently, graces attributed to the Saints Valentine have taken new forms. Couples separated by distance, illness, or adverse circumstances report providential interventions that enabled them to reunite. Marriages in crisis testify that they found the strength to overcome their difficulties by invoking the intercession of the patron saints of love. A particularly notable aspect is how frequently devotees mention the symbol of the rose in their miraculous experiences. Whether through roses blooming out of season, petals appearing inexplicably, or the mysterious scent of roses during critical moments, this symbol continues to manifest as a sign of the saint's intercession. Chapter 14. Prayer and Devotion. Over the centuries, devotion to the Saints Valentine has inspired numerous prayers and spiritual practices. The oldest and most revered is the traditional prayer to Saint Valentine of Terni, passed down through generations. Saint Valentine, who sowed kindness, love, and peace on earth, be my spiritual guide. Teach me to accept my companion's faults and shortcomings and help him to recognize my virtues and callings. The most widespread devotional practice is the novena to the Saints Valentine, which begins 9 days before February 14th. During these days, the faithful meditate on different aspects of Christian love, inspired by the teachings of both saints. Each day of the novena is dedicated to a particular virtue. fidelity, patience, forgiveness, understanding, generosity, purity, courage, wisdom, and finally, sacrificial love. For fiancés and married couples, there is a beautiful tradition of shared prayer. Following the example of the parable of the rose, spouses or betrothed partners hold a rose together while praying, reminding themselves that they must cherish their love as delicately as they hold the flower. This practice is often accompanied by the following prayer. Saint Valentine, who defended true love even to the point of giving your life, teach us to love one another as Christ loves his church. Modern devotion has also embraced moments of personal reflection on the saints' teachings. Devotees are invited to keep a love journal in which they record their reflections on the growth of their love, the challenges they face, and their moments of grace. This practice is inspired by Father Valentine's final letter and Bishop Valentine's counsel. Let us conclude this journey through the life and legacy of the Saints Valentine, with a final prayer that encapsulates the essence of their message. O glorious Saints Valentine, witnesses of true love and martyrs of the faith, who through your lives taught us that love is stronger than death and more precious than all the treasures of the world, help us to understand, like the wise Bishop of Terni, that love, like a beautiful rose, requires care, patience, and courage. Teach us, as the valiant priest of Rome, to defend sacred love even in times of adversity. Intercede for all lovers, that their love may be pure and strong, for marriages, that they may reflect Christ's love for his church, and for all those who seek true love, that they may find it on the path of faith. May your example inspire us to live love as a divine gift, to forgive as we have been forgiven, and to persevere until the end on the path of love. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, source of all true love. Amen.